I placed the cups on the tray and checked once more to see if there was enough sugar in the sugar bowl. Kyle had always loved sweet coffee, ever since he was a child. I remember how he would ask for another spoonful, wrinkle his nose, and say that coffee without sugar was as bitter as medicine. It seemed so cute back then. He would sit on a high chair, swing his legs, and talk about kindergarten, and I would listen to his every word as if it were the most important news in the world. Today, he promised to come around 3 in the afternoon. He said he wanted to discuss important matters with me. On the phone, his voice sounded tense, almost formal. Not like before, when he called just to chat or talk about work. He didn't even ask how I was doing or how my health was. He just dryly announced that he would be coming with Jessica in the afternoon. I glanced at the clock on the mantelpiece, 2:30. He should be here soon. I walked around the living room, straightened the cushions on the sofa, even though they were already perfectly arranged. The house was in that special state of order that only people who live alone and have enough time to clean can achieve. Everything was in its place, no scattered newspapers or dirty dishes. 5 years ago, when Robert died, I thought I wouldn't be able to live in this big house alone. Too many memories, too much empty space. Every room reminded me of the years we had spent together. But time has taught me to appreciate the silence and the opportunity to do what I want, when I want. I don't have to ask anyone if I can rearrange the furniture or plant new roses in the garden. Kyle was very supportive at the time. He came every weekend and helped with the things my grandfather used to do. We sorted through documents together. He explained how to use new bank cards, showed me how online banking works. He was patient and caring. He said he would never leave me alone, that I could always count on him. I remembered how 13 years ago I took him in after that terrible accident. Kyle was 15 at the time, and he lost his parents, my son David and his wife Sarah, in one day. A drunk truck driver ran a red light and crashed into their car at an intersection. They were on their way to a parent-teacher conference at Kyle's school. The boy was devastated, withdrew into himself, and hardly spoke for days on end. I decided then that I had to be his grandmother, mother, and father all at once. Maybe that's when I started spoiling him too much. I bought him everything he asked for and never refused him anything. I wanted to compensate him for the loss of his parents, to give him at least a little joy in his grief. When he wanted expensive sneakers, I bought them. When he asked for a new phone, I went to the store without hesitation. When he turned 18 and said he wanted a car, I paid for the car, insurance, and driving lessons without hesitation. Grandma, you're the best in the world, he said then, hugging me tightly. I love you so much. You saved my life. And I believed every word he said. I believed that I was doing the right thing, that he would carry my love and care throughout his life and someday pass it on to his children. That when I grew old, he would be there for me, just as I was there for him now. College admission, tuition, an apartment near the university, weekly help with food and clothes. I took care of all this without hesitation. Robert sometimes gently pointed out that it was possible to set some boundaries, that the boy needed to learn responsibility, but I dismissed it. He had such a difficult childhood. Let him at least now feel what it means to be loved and protected. Gloria, you're turning him into a mama's boy, my husband said, shaking his head. At his age, I was already working and supporting myself. Times are different, I replied. Besides, it's not his fault he's an orphan. Let him study in peace and find himself. We have money. Robert didn't argue anymore, but sometimes I caught his pensive gaze when Kyle asked for another sum of money for some need. The sound of a car in the yard interrupted my thoughts. I looked out the window and saw Kyle's familiar silver sedan. Jessica, his wife, was getting out of the car next to him. She was a short blonde with a neat haircut and always impeccable makeup. She wore expensive clothes and had her nails done at the salon every week. They got married a year and a half ago, and of course, I paid for the wedding. 50 guests, a restaurant in downtown San Diego, fresh flowers, a photographer, a videographer, musicians. Everything was done to the highest standard. I spent $45,000 on this celebration. Kyle looked tense, broad shoulders under a polo shirt, short dark hair like his father's at the same age, but a completely different expression on his face. David always smiled when he came to visit us. He hugged me, asked how I was doing, told funny stories from work. Kyle walked toward the house with a serious, almost stern look, as if he were going to a business meeting rather than to his grandmother's house. I opened the door before they even rang the bell. "Hello, dear ones," I said, hugging Kyle first, then Jessica. "How was your trip? Come in. I made coffee." Kyle hugged me formally, without warmth, patted me on the back, and quickly stepped back. Jessica offered her cheek for a kiss, but her body remained tense. "Thanks, Gloria," Jessica replied politely, but without much warmth. The trip was fine. There wasn't much traffic. Kyle nodded without even smiling. He went into the living room and sat down in the armchair that his grandfather used to sit in. It was a large leather chair from which Robert loved to read the evening news. Kyle sat down in it as if it were his own, leaned back, and crossed his legs. Jessica settled down on the sofa, folded her arms on her knees, and looked at me expectantly. I brought a tray with coffee and placed it on the coffee table. I added cookies to the coffee, which I had bought yesterday at the bakery where Kyle loved to buy sweets as a child. Kyle took a cup without saying thank you, took a sip, and grimaced. "Too bitter," he said discontentedly. "Make it sweeter next time. You know how much I love coffee." I said nothing, even though the sugar was right in front of him. He used to add as much as he needed himself, and he always thanked me for the coffee, even when he was a teenager. "Grandma, we need to have a serious talk," Kyle began, not waiting for me to sit down. "We have a problem with Jess's car. The transmission is shot, and it'll cost $8,000 to repair. That's more than the car is worth." "I see," I said, sitting down on the edge of the sofa. "What have you decided to do?" "Buy a new one, of course," he replied as if it were obvious. "We've already chosen a 2022 Honda Accord, $32,000. Jessica nodded and took out her phone to show me photos of the car. It was beautiful, white, with leather seats and lots of extra options. "Look how beautiful it is," she said, flipping through the photos. "It has climate control, heated seats, a rear-view camera, navigation, all the latest features. We could take out a loan," she continued, "but the interest rate is very high right now, almost 7%. And if we pay cash, the dealer will even give us a discount. $2,000. I understood where they were going with this, but I decided not to make it easy for them. "And you want me to help with the purchase?" I asked bluntly. "Well, yes," Kyle shrugged, as if he were asking for $50 until payday, not over $30,000. "You know we'll pay it back, as soon as I get a promotion at work. Bob promised that I'd be appointed senior manager in the new year. He'd been talking about the promotion for 6 months. He worked as a manager at a construction company and earned a decent salary, but he still constantly complained that he didn't have enough money. However, that didn't stop them from dining out every weekend and going on vacation to Las Vegas every 2 months. "When do you need to decide on the car?" I asked. "We want to go to the dealer tomorrow morning," Jessica replied. "If we say we're paying cash, they'll lock in the price and give us a discount. Otherwise, good cars sell out quickly." "I see. What about your savings? Young families usually have some kind of safety net." Kyle frowned, and his voice became irritated. "Grandma, you know that prices are rising for everything. Rent, groceries, gas. We're barely making ends meet. If we had $30,000 to spare, we wouldn't be sitting here asking for help. There was a note of irritation in his voice, as if I were asking stupid questions, as if I should automatically get out my checkbook and write out the amount he wanted. Okay, I said calmly. I'll think about it and give you an answer tomorrow morning. Think about it? Kyle raised his eyebrows in surprise. What's there to think about? We're family, and family helps each other. You've always helped me, and I've never let you down. Exactly, I said quietly. Family helps each other. Jessica exchanged a glance with her husband, and I caught that quick look. There was something about it that I didn't like, a kind of understanding, as if they had discussed in advance how exactly they would convince me. Okay, Grandma. Kyle stood up abruptly from his chair, clearly dissatisfied that he hadn't received immediate consent. Think about it until tomorrow. But don't take too long, because good cars sell fast, and we need to get to the dealer before lunch. They were ready to leave as quickly as they had arrived. They didn't ask about my health, didn't ask how I was doing, didn't offer to help around the house. They just made their request and waited for an immediate response. Kyle, I called after him as he reached the door. How's work? How's your new position? He turned around, but his expression didn't soften. Fine, Grandma. I'm working, making money. Bob says I'm doing well with the projects. I'll probably get a promotion soon. And Jessica? How are you doing, dear? Everything's fine, Gloria, my daughter-in-law replied curtly. I'm working as an administrator at a beauty salon. There are a lot of clients, so the day goes by quickly. I nodded, realizing that I shouldn't expect much more conversation. Well, goodbye then. See you tomorrow. Goodbye, Kyle called from the car. They left 10 minutes later, and the house was quiet again. I cleared away the cups they hadn't even finished drinking from and wiped the crumbs from the untouched cookies off the table. The dishes clattered in the sink, and my mind was spinning with thoughts of how much my grandson had changed in recent months. I sat down in the chair where Kyle had just been sitting and closed my eyes. Memories came flooding back. 18 years ago, when Kyle was only 10, he asked me for something serious for the first time. The school was raising money for a trip to Disneyland, and many of the children's parents couldn't afford it. David and Sarah were going through a difficult time. David was having problems at work, and Sarah was staying home with little Kyle. Grandma Gloria, he said, snuggling up to me on the sofa. All the kids are going to Disneyland, but Mom says we don't have the money, but I really want to see the real Mickey Mouse. His eyes were so sad that my heart sank. Of course, I immediately gave him the money for the trip. $250 seemed like a small price to pay for a child's happiness. Kyle was so happy that he hugged me for an hour and promised to bring me a souvenir. After his parents died, these requests became constant. First, it was school uniforms. The private school I transferred him to required special jackets and pants. Then textbooks, which in America cost half a student's scholarship. Then a sports uniform for the football team, a tennis racket, a suit for prom. I remember how we chose that suit. Kyle was 17 then. He had grown up and become a handsome young man with broad shoulders and his father's smile. We drove all over San Diego looking for the perfect outfit. In the end, we settled on a dark blue Hugo Boss suit for $800. Grandma, I'm going to be the best-looking guy at prom, he laughed, trying on the jacket in front of the mirror. All the girls will be crazy about me. The main thing is that you like yourself, I replied, adjusting his tie. And I do like myself. And thank you so much. I'll never forget this. He really seemed grateful then. He hugged me tightly, kissed me on the cheek, and said I was the best grandmother in the world. And I believed that his gratitude was genuine, that he truly appreciated everything I did for him. Getting into college required even more investment. It was a private school where a year of tuition cost $50,000. Kyle wanted to study business administration and dreamed of a career in a large corporation. I didn't hesitate for a second. Education is an investment in the future, and my grandson's future was more important to me than anything else in the world. Are you sure, Gloria? Robert asked, looking at the tuition bills. That's $200,000 for 4 years. We could buy another house with that money. Education is more valuable than any house, I replied with conviction. Kyle is a smart boy. He'll find his way. And we can buy a house later when he starts earning money. Robert shook his head but didn't argue. He understood how important this boy was to me, how much I feared losing him after the death of my son. 4 years of college flew by quickly. Kyle came home for vacations and talked about his studies, his new friends, and his teachers. Sometimes he asked for extra money, for textbooks, for a class trip, for a new laptop he needed for his studies. I never refused. Grandma, you have no idea how competitive it is there, he said when he asked for money for an internship in New York. All students dream of being accepted into cool companies, but only the best are chosen. And for that, you need to look the part, have nice clothes, and know how to make an impression. Of course, I gave him the money for the internship, $5,000 a month in New York. Rent, clothes, food. Kyle came back happy, full of plans and ideas. He talked about the skyscrapers of Manhattan, business meetings, how real professionals work. After college, he got a job in San Diego, but the salary of a junior manager was not as high as he had hoped. Kyle rented a small studio apartment and constantly complained about not having enough money. I helped him every month, $1,000 for living expenses so he could eat and dress properly. It's temporary, Grandma, he assured me. As soon as I get a raise, I'll be independent. But apartments in the city are so expensive now, and salaries are low, temporarily turned into 3 years. 3 years of monthly transfers, paying phone and internet bills, buying gifts for birthdays and holidays. But I didn't complain. A young man needs time to get on his feet. Then Jessica came along, a beautiful blonde who worked at an advertising agency and dreamed of owning her own beauty salon. Kyle was head over heels in love, talking about her every day, showing me photos, telling me about his plans for the future. She's special, Grandma. His eyes lit up. Smart, beautiful, determined. I want to propose to her. The engagement ring cost $8,000. Kyle spent 2 weeks choosing it, studying catalogs, consulting with salespeople. He said Jessica deserved only the best. I paid for the ring without hesitation. My grandson was happy, and that was the greatest reward. The wedding was a real celebration. Kyle wanted everything to be perfect so that the bride would feel like a princess. A restaurant by the ocean, white roses and orchids, musicians, a photographer who had shot celebrity weddings. Jessica's dress cost $4,000. Kyle's suit, $1,500. Grandma, I don't know how to thank you, he said on his wedding day, hugging me in the restaurant lobby. You gave us a fabulous celebration. We will never forget it. Jessica also thanked me, kissed me on the cheeks, and said that I was the most generous and kind woman in the world. That day, they really seemed sincere, full of love and gratitude. The honeymoon in Italy cost another $15,000. Kyle sent photos from Venice and Florence and wrote enthusiastic messages about museums and restaurants. He said it was the best time of his life and that he was incredibly happy. After the wedding, the newlyweds rented a larger apartment, a two-bedroom apartment with an ocean view. The rent was $3,500 a month, and Kyle asked for help with the deposit, $10,000, so they could start their family life in a beautiful place. We'll save up and pay you back soon, Jessica promised. It's just that right now, we have a lot of expenses for setting up the house, furniture, appliances. The furniture was indeed expensive. an Italian kitchen for $12,000, a leather sofa for $4,000, a bedroom set for $8,000. Each time, Kyle explained that it was an investment in the future, that quality items would last a lifetime. A year after the wedding, Kyle started talking about a house. He said that renting was a waste of money and that it was time to buy their own home. He studied real estate listings, drove around the neighborhoods, and selected suitable options. "Grandma, we found the perfect house," he said 3 weeks ago, coming to me with shining eyes. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a two-car garage, a large kitchen, and a yard with a pool. It's exactly what we dreamed of. The price of the house was $580,000. Kyle had already talked to the bank about a loan, but to get a good rate, they needed a down payment of 20%, $116,000. "We have $36,000 saved up," he explained at the time, "but we still need $80,000 more. Can you help? It's not a gift, it's an investment. The house will appreciate in value. In a few years, it will be worth more." I remembered that day at the bank when I transferred the money. The manager, a young woman of about 35, asked me to repeat the amount several times. $280,000? She asked, looking at her computer screen. "Yes," I replied confidently. "It's a gift to my grandson to buy a house." I decided to give more than Kyle asked for. Let them have a reserve for repairs, furniture, and furnishings. Let them start their family life without financial problems. "Are you sure about this decision?" the manager asked gently. "It's a very large sum." "Absolutely sure," I replied. "My grandson is like a son to me. I want him to have a good life." The transfer was instantaneous. $280,000 moved from my account to Kyle's with the click of a button. I imagined how happy he would be when he saw the amount, how he would thank me, how he would tell Jessica about his grandmother's generosity. But there was no thank you call. 2 days later, Kyle sent a short message. "Thanks for your help. We're going to close the deal tomorrow." No excitement, no words of love, just a dry statement of fact. At the time, I thought he was just excited about the upcoming purchase and would express his gratitude later when we met. But we hadn't met for 3 weeks until today. And today he came not with gratitude, but with a new request for money. I am now sitting in the silence of my home and thinking about how much money I have spent on my grandson over the years. If you count exactly, it's more than $500,000. Education, housing, wedding, gifts, monthly assistance, and finally, this house. A huge amount of money that could have provided me with a comfortable old age. But it's not about the money. The thing is, I wasn't expecting repayment of the debt, just simple human gratitude, warmth, and attention. But all I get are new requests and demands, as if I were an ATM and not a grandmother who loves and cares. The next day, I transferred the money for the car to Kyle. $32,000 left my account as easily as all the previous amounts. Kyle thanked me with a short message and sent a photo of the new white Honda. The car was really beautiful, shiny, with perfectly clean windows. A week later, they came in the new car to show off their purchase. Jessica beamed with happiness, talking about how convenient the navigation system was, how smoothly the transmission worked, and how pleasant the interior was. Kyle solemnly explained the technical specifications and boasted about the engine's fuel efficiency. "Thank you, Grandma," he said, but somewhat formally, without much warmth. "The car is great. We're happy with it." After inspecting the car, we returned to the house, and Kyle looked around. "It's gotten dusty in here," he remarked, running his finger across the coffee table, "and there are cobwebs in the corners. When was the last time you did a thorough cleaning?" I was surprised by his comment. The house was in order, I cleaned regularly, but of course I didn't wipe every surface to a shine every day. I clean as usual, I replied. I don't see any particular dirt. I do, Kyle insisted. Look at these photo frames. They're covered in dust, and the mirror in the hallway is kind of cloudy. Jessica nodded in support of her husband. Yes, Gloria, it's really noticeable. You live alone, so it must be difficult to keep such a big house in perfect condition. Maybe you should hire a housekeeper, Kyle suggested. You have money and you need to take care of your health. Why do you need to mop floors and dust at 72? The suggestion sounded reasonable, but something in Kyle's tone alarmed me. It was as if he was pointing out my shortcomings rather than showing concern. I'll think about it, I said neutrally. In the meantime, Kyle took off his jacket and hung it on the back of a chair. Maybe you could tidy up a little. We're visiting, and I'd like it to be clean and cozy. I was taken aback by his wording. Was he asking me to clean my own house while they sat in the living room? Kyle, the house is clean, I said cautiously. If you don't like something, you can wipe down whatever you think is dirty yourself. He raised his eyebrows as if I had suggested something outrageous. Grandma, I'm not the hostess of this house. This is your territory. You're the one who should keep it tidy. We're guests. It's awkward for us to boss people around here. Jessica nodded in agreement, examining her nails. Besides, Kyle continued, we have plans for tonight. We can't spend all day cleaning here, and you have nothing else to do anyway. The last sentence hurt. Nothing else to do? I had my own life, my own business, my own interest, but I kept quiet, picked up a rag, and started dusting the furniture. Kyle and Jessica settled comfortably on the sofa and continued discussing the merits of the new car. Half an hour later, when I had finished dusting, Kyle looked into the kitchen. What about food? He asked. We haven't had lunch yet. We're hungry after the trip to the dealer. I can make something, I replied. What would you like? Something simple, maybe pasta with sauce or sandwiches. Just make sure it's filling, please, because we only had coffee and croissants for breakfast. I started cooking the pasta, chopped the vegetables for the sauce, and put the water on to boil. Kyle came into the kitchen from time to check on the progress. Don't forget to salt the pasta water, he said, and add extra sauce. I like it when you can hardly see the pasta. Do you have any cheese? Jessica asked. Parmesan? Pasta isn't the same without good cheese. There was no parmesan, and Kyle shook his head in disappointment. Wow, Grandma, you don't keep such basic ingredients at home. How can you live without decent cheese? Run to the store and buy some. There's a supermarket nearby, 5 minutes by car. Kyle, I don't have a car, I reminded him. I walk to the store or order delivery. Well, take my car, he said, handing me the keys. Be careful, it's new, and don't scratch it in the parking lot. I took the keys, feeling strange. I was 72 years old. I had bought him this car, and he was giving me instructions on how to use it. At the store, I bought not only Parmesan cheese, but also bread for sandwiches, ham, and tomatoes, in case they didn't like the pasta. It took me 40 minutes to get there and back. When I returned, Kyle and Jessica were watching TV and discussing their plans for the weekend. Ah, you're back, Kyle said, without taking his eyes off the screen. Did you buy the cheese? Of course, I said, showing him the shopping bag. Great. Then finish cooking. We're very hungry. Lunch was spent discussing Jessica's new job. She had moved to another beauty salon that paid more, and now she was planning to save money for her own business. Kyle supported his wife, saying she had golden hands and excellent taste. True, you need startup capital for your own salon, Jessica mused aloud. Rent, equipment, advertising. Probably 100,000 to start with. I felt that this conversation was not accidental, but decided not to react. After lunch, Kyle asked me to wash his shirts. He said that the washing machine at home was broken and he had an important meeting at work tomorrow. Be careful, he warned, folding the shirts into the basket. These are expensive shirts. They can't be washed in hot water. And iron them carefully so you don't burn them. I took the laundry basket, feeling some inner resistance. When I became a grandmother, I imagined a completely different relationship with my grandson. I thought we would walk together, talk, and share our thoughts. Not that I would be his servant. While the shirts were washing, Jessica asked to see my bedroom. She said she wanted to ask my advice about the design of her future bedroom in her new house. You have such beautiful furniture, she admired, looking at the antique dressing table. And what a huge closet. There must be a lot of empty space if you live alone. There's plenty of space, I replied cautiously. Do you wear these jewelry pieces? Jessica opened the box on the dressing table. What beautiful earrings! And is this ring made with real diamonds? It's my mother's wedding ring, I explained, a family heirloom. I see. Jessica closed the box carefully. But Gloria, don't you think such a big house is too much for one person? So many rooms are empty, and the utility bills must be huge. I understood what she was getting at and felt irritated. I'm comfortable in this house, I said firmly. My whole life is here, all my memories. Of course, Jessica quickly agreed. I just thought maybe you should consider something smaller, an apartment in the city center, for example. Less cleaning, less maintenance costs. When they were about to leave, Kyle picked up his washed and ironed shirts. Thanks, Grandma, he said. They turned out great. I'll bring more laundry next time, if you don't mind. You don't mind, do you? He didn't even ask my opinion. He just stated it as a fact. By the way, he added at the door, next time we come, make something more substantial. Maybe a roast or chicken. This pasta isn't very filling. After they left, I sat in the living room for a long time, thinking about what had happened. Something had changed dramatically in our relationship. Before Kyle would come to visit, we would talk. He would take an interest in my life, tell me about his affairs. And now he comes with specific needs to eat, do laundry, get money. And the most unpleasant thing is that Jessica fully supports him. Moreover, it seems that she is the one pushing him to behave this way. These hints about the house being too big, about unnecessary decorations, about my supposedly idle life. I knew I had to say something, set boundaries, explain that I was a grandmother, not a housekeeper. But every time I looked at Kyle, I remembered the 15-year-old boy who had lost his parents and needed my protection. And I kept quiet, hoping that this was a temporary phenomenon, that he would come to his senses and remember how I had loved and supported him all these years. The invitation to dinner at Jessica's parents' house came unexpectedly. Jessica herself called and said that her mother, Patricia, really wanted to get to know me better. She said we had only seen each other briefly at the wedding, and now that the newlyweds had a home of their own, it was time to establish family ties. Mom makes amazing salmon, Jessica said on the phone, and Dad wants to show you his wine collection. He's a big connoisseur and has traveled all over California's vineyards. I agreed, even though big family gatherings have never been my strong suit, especially when you don't know people very well. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to see Kyle in a different setting, maybe to understand what was going on with our relationship. Jessica's family lived in the prestigious La Jolla neighborhood, in a two-story house overlooking the ocean. Patricia Henderson worked as an interior designer, and her husband Richard owned a small but successful law firm. They were wealthy, educated people with good manners. I arrived by taxi, having ordered a car for 7 o'clock in the evening, as agreed. I wore my best dark blue dress, the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 40th wedding anniversary, and a small handbag to match the dress. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. I looked decent, family style, solemn. The Hendersons' house was strikingly elegant: white walls, large windows, modern furniture in pastel colors. The living room was decorated with paintings that were clearly not cheap, and the coffee table was covered with expensive art books. Patricia met me at the door, a woman in her 50s with short ash colored hair and attentive brown eyes. She was impeccably dressed: white pants, a silk blouse, and elegant shoes with small heels. "Gloria, how nice to see you in our home." She smiled, extending her hand for a handshake. "Come in, make yourself comfortable. Richard is just opening the wine." Richard turned out to be a tall man with noble gray hair and a firm handshake. He spoke softly, thoughtfully, clearly accustomed to weighing every word. He showed me his wine collection, explained the difference between grape varieties, and told me about his trip to Bordeaux. "This is Chardonnay from Napa Valley," he said, pouring white wine into thin glasses. "The 2019 vintage, very good. Try it. It has an interesting fruity bouquet." Kyle and Jessica arrived 15 minutes later. Jessica looked elegant in a black dress and high heels, while Kyle wore dark trousers and a shirt, but looked somewhat tense. He greeted Jessica's parents politely but dryly and gave me a fleeting hug. "Hi, Grandma," he said without even smiling. "How did you get here?" "By taxi, everything's fine," I replied. "By taxi?" Richard was surprised. "Why not by car? Don't you have a license?" "I do, but I don't have a car," I explained. "I sold it after my husband died. I don't see the point in keeping a car when you live alone." "I see," Richard nodded. "At your age, it's really wise to give up driving. Less stress, less responsibility." Kyle snorted. "At her age, a lot of things become unnecessary. A big house, unnecessary things, unnecessary expenses. It's time to think about it." I was surprised by this remark in the presence of strangers. Patricia also looked slightly embarrassed. "Well, everyone has their own preferences," she said softly. "The main thing is that a person feels comfortable." "Comfort is one thing, practicality is another," Kyle objected, settling into his chair. "You can't live your whole life in the past." The conversation took an unpleasant turn, and I decided to change the subject. "Patricia, Jessica said you're an interior designer. You have a very beautiful home." "Thank you," smiled the hostess. "It's both my job and my hobby. I love creating spaces that are pleasant to live in." We talked about design, the importance of using light and color correctly, and current trends in interior design. Richard talked about his practice and the difficult cases he has to deal with. Jessica shared her plans for her career development. Kyle hardly participated in the conversation, only occasionally making comments that surprised me with their sharpness. "Grandma, you're talking too loud," he said in the middle of my story about how Robert and I traveled around Europe. "This isn't a stadium." I was confused. I was speaking in my normal voice, and none of the others seemed annoyed. On the contrary, Patricia listened with interest to our travels. "I'm sorry," I muttered, lowering my voice. "And don't wave your arms around so much," Kyle added. "It looks inappropriate." Richard frowned but said nothing. Patricia exchanged glances with her husband. When dinner was served, I offered to help set the table, but Patricia politely declined. "Thank you, Gloria, but I've already prepared everything. Please sit down." The table was beautifully set with a white tablecloth, beautiful dishes, and fresh flowers in the center. The salmon was indeed excellent. The vegetable side dish was perfectly cooked, and there was a salad of fresh greens with nuts and feta cheese. But I was unable to enjoy dinner because of Kyle's constant comments. "Grandma, bring me some more bread," he said, without even looking up from his plate. "Kyle," Patricia said gently, "the bread is right next to you." "Yes, but Grandma is sitting closer," he replied indifferently. I got up and handed him the bread basket. feeling my cheeks burn with shame. Richard watched the scene intently. And pour me some water, Kyle added, pushing his glass toward me. I can't reach it. The water jug was in the center of the table, within reach of anyone sitting there. But I silently poured him some water, trying not to make eye contact with the hosts. Gloria, Richard said delicately, try the salmon with this sauce. Patricia makes it according to a special recipe. Thank you, I replied, taking the dish he offered me. Don't thank him, Kyle said sharply. Better say something clever about the food. Otherwise, you're sitting there silently, like you're in a museum. I felt my stomach tighten. Kyle had never spoken to me in that tone before, especially in front of other people. Kyle, Jessica said quietly, maybe you shouldn't. Why shouldn't I? He turned to his wife. I'm just explaining to Grandma how to behave in polite society. It's good for her. Patricia put down her fork and looked intently at Kyle. Excuse me, but I think Gloria is behaving perfectly appropriately. She is polite and pleasant to talk to. You don't know her very well. Kyle shrugged. She's our family bore. She always tells the same stories about the past, complains about her health, demands attention. I froze with a piece of salmon on my fork. Where did this anger come from? When did I complain about my health or demand attention? And she dresses like an old woman, Kyle continued, critically examining my dress. Look at this dress. It's 1970s fashion. And those earrings, they're like something your grandmother would wear. Richard slammed his glass down on the table. Kyle, stop that right now. Your grandmother looks elegant and dignified. I think she looks old-fashioned, Kyle persisted. It's time to update your wardrobe if you're going to be visiting respectable homes. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back with all my strength. I didn't want to cry at someone else's table. Would you like some more salad? Patricia offered, clearly trying to lighten the mood. Grandma, pass the salad, Kyle immediately commanded. And don't forget to take napkins. Your hands are shaking. You might spill it. My hands were indeed shaking slightly, but from nerves, not old age. I passed the salad, trying not to look at the hosts' faces. By the way, Kyle said, serving himself some salad, Grandma is now our personal ATM. She recently bought me a car, and before that she helped me buy a house. Right, Grandma? Kyle, Jessica said warningly. What, Kyle? He turned to his wife. Did I say something wrong? Or is it okay to take the money but not to talk about it? Richard and Patricia exchanged glances. The atmosphere at the table became unbearably tense. Family should help family, I said quietly. It's normal. Of course it's normal, Kyle agreed. But sometimes you act like you're doing us a favor. We should be happy that the money is being put to good use instead of just sitting in the bank. Kyle, Richard said sharply, enough. You're being unacceptable. What's the big deal? Kyle asked in surprise. I'm not swearing or fighting. I'm just telling the truth. Grandma is too used to being praised and thanked all the time. It's time for her to grow up and realize that the world doesn't revolve around her. Patricia got up from the table. Gloria, shall we go out on the terrace? There's a beautiful view of the ocean. I gratefully accepted the offer. The terrace was quiet, with only the sound of the surf and a light breeze. Patricia brought me a glass of water and sat down next to me. Gloria, I don't know what's going on in your family, she said cautiously, but what just happened at the table is unacceptable. No one should talk to their elders like that. I don't know what's going on with him, I admitted. He used to be different. Jessica sometimes tells me how much you do for them, Patricia continued, but I thought they appreciated it. We sat in silence, watching the darkening ocean. Inside the house, muffled voices could be heard. It sounded like Richard was talking to Kyle, and the conversation was serious. Half an hour later, I asked for a taxi. Patricia offered to drive me, but I declined. I didn't want to cause any more inconvenience. Kyle didn't come out to say goodbye. Jessica walked me to the car, looking embarrassed and upset. Gloria, please forgive him, she said quietly. He's stressed at work, having problems with his boss. He didn't mean it. I nodded but didn't respond. In the taxi on the way home, I thought about what had happened at dinner. Never in my life had I felt so ashamed and hurt by the behavior of someone close to me. My home greeted me with its familiar silence, but today that silence seemed empty rather than soothing. I locked the door, took off my shoes, and walked into the living room, still hearing Kyle's voice in my ears, his mocking remarks, his contemptuous indifference to my feelings. I sat down in my favorite armchair by the window and stared at the dark garden for a long time, trying to put my thoughts in order. What happened at that beautifully set table was not just an unpleasant incident. It was humiliation, public, deliberate, cruel. Kyle wasn't just rude, he was methodically destroying my dignity in front of people I barely knew. Each of his remarks hit the mark. My age, my appearance, my mannerisms. I remembered Richard's face when Kyle ordered me to pass him the bread. Surprise, then indignation, then poorly concealed anger. Patricia tried to smooth things over, but her eyes said the same thing. She was shocked by my grandson's behavior, and the most painful thing was that Jessica didn't stop her husband. She sat silently, muttering something indistinct from time to time, but she didn't defend me or tell him that he was behaving disgustingly. I got up from my chair and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at my reflection, a 72-year-old woman in a dark blue dress and pearl earrings. What did Kyle find so inappropriate about my appearance? The dress was classic in style, made of high-quality fabric, nothing provocative or inappropriate. The earrings were a gift from her late husband, a precious memory of happy years. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup subtle. "Dresses like an old woman," I repeated his words aloud. "70s fashion. How should a woman my age dress? In jeans and a t-shirt? In bright, youthful outfits that would look ridiculous on gray hair and wrinkled hands? I have always dressed tastefully, elegantly, appropriately for my age and the occasion, and no one except Kyle found anything wrong with that. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. My hands were indeed shaking slightly, as he had noticed, but not from old age, but from the stress I had experienced. I sat at the kitchen table, drank chamomile tea, and remembered every detail of that horror. "Family bore" was another of his phrases, always telling the same stories about the past, complaining about her health. When did I complain about my health? When did I bother him with old stories? On the contrary, I always tried to be an interesting conversationalist, talking about the books I read, the movies I watched, the news. When I talked about the past, it was only in the context of the conversation, when it was appropriate. Today at the Hendersons' house, I talked about my travels with Robert only because Patricia herself asked about them. Or maybe I really have become boring and don't notice it. Maybe old age makes a person blind to their own shortcomings. No, I know for sure that I behave decently, and Jessica's parents' reaction only confirms this. They were outraged by Kyle's behavior, not mine. But the worst thing wasn't even the insults. The worst thing was how he talked about money. Our personal ATM. Money is put to good use, not left sitting dead in the bank. As if I owed him financially. As if my money rightfully belonged to him and I was just its temporary custodian. I remembered all the money I had spent on him over the years. Education, $200,000. Help in the early years of his career, $36,000. The wedding, $45,000. The engagement ring, $8,000. Help with the apartment, $10,000. Furniture and appliances, another $25,000. And finally, the house, $280,000. The car, $32,000. more than $600,000 over 13 years. A huge sum that could have ensured me a comfortable old age, allowed me to travel, live in luxury, and deny myself nothing. But I gave it all to Kyle because I loved him, because I wanted him to have a good life. And what did I get in return? Rudeness, indifference, demands, and complaints. Today, he humiliated me in a way that no one else has ever done in my entire life. And he did it publicly, demonstratively, with some kind of sadistic pleasure. I got up from the table and went to the office where I kept important documents. I took the bank statements out of the safe and laid them out on the table. The last transfer to Kyle was $280,000 on November 15th, 3 weeks ago. Money for the purchase of a house, which I gave him not because he asked for it, but because I wanted to do something nice. I wanted the young family to have a reserve for settling in and for unexpected expenses. I looked at my watch. It was 9:30 in the evening. The bank was closed, of course, but there was a 24-hour telephone service for important transactions. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. California Trust Bank, Emergency Support Service, answered a male voice. My name is Michael. How can I help you? Good evening, I said, trying to speak clearly and confidently. My name is Gloria Reed, and I have an account with your bank. The number is 472-189-3742. One moment, Mrs. Reed. I heard the sound of keys being typed. Can you give me your maiden name to confirm your identity? Thompson. Thank you. How can I help you? On November 15th, I made a large transfer from my account. $280,000. I want to cancel that transaction. Pause. Mrs. Reed, it's been 3 weeks since the transaction. Usually, transfers can only be canceled within the first 24 hours, and even then, only under special circumstances. What could be considered special circumstances? Fraud, coercion, incorrect details. What is the reason for your request? I thought about it. There was no fraud, nor was there any coercion in the legal sense. No one threatened me physically or forced me to transfer the money at gunpoint. It was a gift to a relative, I said slowly. But now I want to cancel it due to family circumstances. I understand, Michael replied sympathetically. But unfortunately, simply changing your mind is not grounds for canceling the transfer. The money has already been credited to the recipient's account. What if the recipient agrees to return it? Then they can make a reverse transfer to your account. That would be a new transaction, and the bank has no objection to such transfers between private individuals. I see. Can I block the credit card? Of course. Do you have any additional cards issued to your account? Yes, one card in the name of Kayla Reed. One moment. Yes, I see it. An additional card issued 2 years ago. The spending limit is $5,000 per month. Would you like to block it? Yes. For what reason? Loss, theft, suspected fraud? At the request of the primary card holder. Okay, the card will be blocked within 15 minutes. Mr. Reed will receive an SMS notification about the block. Thank you. Anything else? No, that's all. I hung up and sat in the silence of my office for a while. The credit card was blocked. It was a small but important step. Kyle would no longer be able to spend my money on his whims. He wouldn't be able to pay for restaurants and trips to Las Vegas at my expense. But the main problem remained unresolved. $280,000 were already in his account, and the bank couldn't return them without his consent. And Kyle would not voluntarily give up such a large sum. For him, this money was already his, earned by right of kinship. I remembered his words about me being a family ATM. There was some truth to that phrase. He really did see me that way, as a source of money that had to work on demand. And when the ATM starts acting up, you can kick it or express your dissatisfaction with its malfunction. I took a notepad and pen out of the desk drawer. I wrote a short note. Kyle, after tonight at the Hendersons' house, I am reevaluating our relationship. The gift of $280,000 is canceled. I expect the money to be returned to my account within a week. The credit card is blocked. Gloria. I reread the note several times. Short, clear, emotionless. That's exactly how you should talk to someone who has done what Kyle has done. I took a photo of the note with my phone and sent him a message. It was almost 11 o'clock at night, but he always had his phone with him. He would definitely see it. 2 minutes later, the phone rang. Kyle. I didn't answer. Let him think about the situation first. The phone rang 4 more times, then messages started coming in. Grandma, what kind of nonsense are you writing? Are you serious? Call me immediately. We need to talk. This must be some kind of mistake. This can't be happening. You can't take the gift back. That's impossible. I read these messages and was surprised at how quickly his tone had changed. No apologies for tonight, no attempts to explain or justify himself, just indignation and demands to immediately return everything to the way it was. I turned off my phone and went to get ready for bed. In the bedroom, taking off the dress that Kyle had criticized as old-fashioned, I remembered how Robert once said to me, "Gloria, you give too much to people without getting anything in return. Someday, it will come back to haunt you." At the time, I didn't understand his words. I thought that love didn't require accountability, that helping loved ones was natural and right. Now I understand that my husband was right. Unlimited generosity spoils people, turning them into consumers who take gifts for granted. I went to bed and couldn't fall asleep for a long time. The events of the evening were spinning in my head, every insult from Kyle, every contemptuous remark. But gradually, the anger and resentment gave way to a strange feeling of relief. For the first time in many years, I said no. For the first time, I set boundaries. For the first time, I demanded respect for myself. And it was the right thing to do. I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. In the morning, I woke up earlier than usual. It was just beginning to get light outside, but I couldn't sleep anymore. I turned on my phone and saw a dozen more messages from Kyle, each one angrier than the last. The last one came at 3 in the morning. "Grandma, have you completely lost your mind? I'll come over in the morning and we'll discuss everything." I've never heard such nonsense. No attempt to apologize for his behavior yesterday. No words to say that he understood my hurt. Only demands and indignation that I dared to disobey his will. I made myself some coffee and sat by the kitchen window, looking out at the garden in the morning. The roses that Robert and I had planted were preparing for their winter rest. The lawn needed one last mowing before the cold weather set in. The usual cares of an ordinary life, which suddenly seemed calmer without the constant requests for money and humiliating remarks. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang. Insistent, demanding. I didn't rush to open the door, finishing my coffee in small sips. The doorbell rang every 30 seconds. Then there was loud, impatient knocking on the door. "Grandma, open up! I know you're home!" Kyle's voice was angry, almost aggressive. I got up, adjusted my robe, and went to the door. I looked through the peephole. He was standing there alone, without Jessica, his face red with anger. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, Kyle?" I asked calmly. "What do I want?" He tried to push the door open. "I want you to stop this nonsense and put everything back the way it was. Open the door properly. First, apologize for last night." "What do I have to apologize for?" He frowned. "I didn't do anything wrong. Open the door. We need to talk seriously." "Then talk through the door." "Are you kidding me?" Kyle tried to peek through the gap between the door and the frame. "I'm your grandson, not some stranger. Open up immediately." There was not a hint of remorse in his voice, only irritation and demand, as if I was obligated to let him in regardless of how he behaved. No, I said firmly. Until you apologize for humiliating me in front of everyone yesterday, you're not coming into my house. What are you talking about? He raised his voice. What humiliation? I just told the truth, and the truth can sometimes be unpleasant. The truth? I felt anger boiling up inside me. The truth is that you ordered me to serve you at someone else's table. The truth is that you called me a family bore. The truth is that you criticized my clothes in front of people I barely know. So what? Kyle shrugged. I wanted you to make a good impression, but you sat there like a statue, saying nothing. I had to shake you out of your shell somehow. His logic was so twisted that I was momentarily confused. Shake me out of my shell? I asked. You think humiliation is a way to shake me out of my shell? What humiliation? He banged his fist on the door. You're exaggerating. You always make a mountain out of a molehill. Then let's talk about money, I said coldly. You called me the family ATM. Is that an exaggeration too? Kyle was silent for a few seconds. Look, maybe I didn't express myself very well, he finally said, but his tone remained the same, impatient and irritated. But that doesn't change the fact. You blocked my card in the middle of the night. I have an important meeting with clients today. I wanted to have lunch with them at a restaurant, but the card doesn't work. I had to cancel the meeting. Because of your whims, I may lose a large order. It's not your card, I reminded him. It's my card, which I allowed you to use, and now I'm revoking that permission. How is it not mine? Kyle protested. It's in my name. I've been using it for 2 years. It's registered as an add-on to my account, and the money on it is mine. You would understand that if you read the contracts you sign. What difference does it make whose money it is? He banged on the door again. We're family. Family shares everything. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. An interesting understanding of family. My money is shared, but your respect is yours alone? What does respect have to do with it? I respect you. You respect me? I felt my voice getting louder. You made me serve you at someone else's table. You criticized my clothes. You called me boring. Is that your respect? Enough about that. Kyle waved his hand dismissively. Yesterday is yesterday, and today is today. I need the card. And I need money too. We've already started the paperwork for the house, paid the realtor and the lawyer. If we back out of the deal now, we'll lose the deposit. How much is the deposit? I asked. $15,000, plus the realtor and lawyer fees, another $8,000. That's a total of $23,000 we'll lose. Is that what you want? There was a note of panic in his voice. For the first time in our conversation, he realized that I was serious. It's your choice, I said calmly. No one forced you to spend the money before the deal was finalized. How is it our choice? Kyle's voice broke. You gave the money for the house yourself. You said it was a gift. The gift is canceled. I wrote to you about it last night. You can't cancel a gift, he almost shouted. What's given is given. That's a basic rule. A rule? I smirked. Where were your rules yesterday when you humiliated me in front of strangers? You're getting on my nerves with this humiliation. Kyle slammed the door so hard that it shook. It was nothing special, just a normal family dinner. A normal family dinner, I repeated. At a normal family dinner, does a grandson order his grandmother to serve him food, criticize her clothes, call her boring? Listen, stop playing the same old record. Kyle was clearly losing his patience. Okay, so I wasn't exactly tactful. So what? People sometimes say things they shouldn't when they're nervous. That's no reason to make such a big deal out of it. Not exactly tactful. That's how he described his behavior yesterday. Not cruel, not wrong, not unacceptable, not very tactful. Okay, I said. Let's say you're just not very tactful. Then explain to me why I should give money to someone who doesn't think it's necessary to be tactful with me. Because I'm your grandson, Kyle exploded. Because you raised me. Because I'm your only close relative. Who else are you going to leave your money to? Your cats? Those words contained the whole truth about how he perceived me. Not as a person to be loved and respected, but as a source of inheritance to be tolerated only as long as necessary to get money. Maybe the cats, I said quietly. At least they don't call me boring. You're crazy, Kyle said hoarsely. You've completely lost your mind in your old age. Maybe, I agreed, but it's my madness, and it's my money, and I want you to give me back the $280,000. I won't give you a cent, he shouted. It was a gift. You gave it to me. No one forced me. Then keep it, I said, but you won't get anything else from me. No money, no card, no help, nothing. How dare you? Kyle banged on the door again. I'm your grandson, your blood. You have no right to abandon me. I have no right? I felt myself grow cold inside at his insolence. Did you have the right to humiliate me yesterday? Forget about yesterday, he almost cried with rage. Why are you like a broken record? So we had a fight. It happens in families. No, it doesn't, I said firmly. It doesn't happen in normal families. Open the door. Kyle pulled the handle so hard that the chain tightened. We need to discuss this calmly. You can't make decisions like this on your own. I can, I replied, and I am. Goodbye, Kyle. I closed the door and turned the key in the lock. Kyle banged and rang the doorbell for another 10 minutes, shouting something about family responsibilities and my inappropriate behavior. Then I heard the sound of a car driving away. I sat down in a chair and sat there in silence for a long time. My hands were shaking slightly. My heart was beating fast. But there was a strange feeling of liberation in my chest. For the first time in my life, I said no to Kyle and didn't back down under the pressure of his shouting and demands. The phone rang half an hour later. It was Jessica. Gloria, she said, her voice frightened. What's going on? Kyle came home furious, saying you blocked his card and demanded your money back. Is that true? It's true, I replied calmly. But why? What happened? Everything was fine yesterday. Fine? I asked. Do you think your husband's behavior at dinner was fine? A long pause. He was a little rude, Jessica finally admitted. But he's worried about work. He's stressed. Stress is no excuse for humiliation, I said. And you know that. Gloria, please don't make any rash decisions, Jessica said, her voice breaking. We can talk it over and find a compromise. A compromise about what? That Kyle will humiliate me every other day instead of every day? He'll apologize, Jessica promised. I'll talk to him. He'll realize he was wrong. Half an hour ago, he was standing at my door, I said. Do you know what he asked for? For me to apologize to him for blocking his card. Not a word of remorse for last night. Give him time, Jessica pleaded. Men don't know how to apologize right away. He needs to cool off and think. He had all night to think, I replied. Instead, he sent me a dozen angry messages. But the money! Jessica started to cry. We already paid the deposit and hired lawyers. If the deal falls through, we'll lose everything. That's your risk, I said flatly. No one asked you to spend money before getting final confirmation. Gloria, please. Goodbye, Jessica. I hung up and turned off my phone. 3 days after my conversation with Kyle, the onslaught began. The phone rang constantly from morning to night, even though I only turned it on to check important messages. Everyone called, from Jessica to distant relatives I had almost forgotten existed. The first was Aunt Dorothy, David's sister, who lived in Oregon and only appeared in our lives at funerals and weddings. Her voice was alarmed, almost tragic. Gloria, dear, what's going on? She began without preamble. Kyle called me in tears, saying you kicked him out of the house and took his money. Is that true? It was amazing how quickly the story had grown in detail. Kicked him out of the house turned into I didn't let him in. Took his money turned into I blocked my own credit card. Dorothy, I said calmly, did Kyle tell you why this happened? He said you had some kind of argument at a family dinner. So what? Families always have disagreements. You can't break off relations with your only grandson over something trivial. Trivial, I repeated thoughtfully. I see. But if your grandson humiliated you in public, called you a bore, and made you wait on him at someone else's table, would you still call it trivial? Pause. Well, maybe he just didn't express himself very well, Dorothy said uncertainly. Young people can be a little rough sometimes, but deep down, he loves you. Deep down, I agreed, very deep down. So deep that all you see on the surface are demands for money and insults. Gloria, you're being too dramatic, Dorothy reproached me. Kyle is a good boy, just a little spoiled. It's partly your fault. You indulged him too much. So that's it. It turns out it's my fault that I spoiled him, and now I have to suffer the consequences of my kindness. Dorothy, I said firmly, my relationship with my grandson is between the two of us. Thanks for your concern, but I can handle it myself. But Gloria, goodbye. The next call was from Robert's cousin, Frank, whom I had last seen at my husband's funeral. His approach was more straightforward. Gloria, I heard about your problems with Kyle, he said without preamble. I think you're being unreasonable. The boy is young, hot-headed, and may say things he shouldn't. But family is family. Family, I repeated for the second time that day. Frank, what is family in your understanding? Well, it's when people support each other, help each other in difficult times, forgive each other's mistakes. Support each other, I agreed. And if the support is only one-sided, is it still a family? What do you mean? I supported Kyle for 13 years with money, care, love, and what did I get in return? He's still young, Frank objected. He'll have time to pay his debts when he gets on his feet. It's not about money, I explained. It's about basic respect. Kyle allowed himself to humiliate me in public. Is that normal for a family? Well, maybe he got carried away, Frank admitted, but you can't disinherit him because of that. That's cruel. It's interesting that for some reason everyone decided that this was about inheritance, as if Kyle had some kind of birthright to my money. Frank, I said wearily, I didn't disinherit anyone. I just stopped giving money to someone who doesn't respect me. Gloria, think about the future, he insisted. You're getting older. You may need help. Who will take care of you if not your grandson? We'll see, I replied. Goodbye. Jessica called every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. She used different tactics, sometimes tears and pleas, sometimes attempts to shift the blame to stress and circumstances, sometimes promises that Kyle would change. Gloria, he realizes he made a mistake, she said on another call. He spent all evening yesterday beating himself up for saying too much. It's just that his pride won't let him apologize right away. Pride, I repeated. What does he have to be proud of? Humiliating a 72-year-old woman? He was drunk. Jessica tried another argument. He drank wine at his parents' house and lost control of his words. Jessica, I said calmly, you were there. Kyle had 1 glass of wine the whole evening, and he behaved disgustingly from the very beginning. But we're family, she cried. Families should forgive each other. That word again. Family. A magic word that, according to all my interlocutors, was supposed to automatically erase any grievances and insults. Families should respect each other, I argued, and there hasn't been any respect in our relationship for a long time. Gloria, please give him a chance to make amends, Jessica begged. We'll lose the house. We'll lose the deposit. We'll have to rent an apartment for several more years. That's your choice, I replied. No one forced you to risk your money without guarantees. The most unpleasant call was from Patricia Henderson, Jessica's mother. She called on the fourth day after the scandal. Gloria, she said cautiously, I don't want to interfere in family matters, but Jessica asked me to talk to you. Patricia, I replied, you witnessed how Kyle behaved in your home. Do you think I should put up with that? No, of course not, she said quickly. His behavior was unacceptable. Richard is still upset. But, but, Jessica says your family is in a difficult situation. Kyle lost his parents at a young age, and perhaps that has left a mark on his character. There you go. Now, the death of his parents is an excuse for any behavior. Kyle is 28 years old, and he can still refer to childhood trauma. Patricia, I said wearily, if childhood trauma makes a person cruel, then I'd better stay away from him before things get even worse. Gloria, I understand you, she sighed. I just feel sorry for young people. They really could end up homeless. And I feel sorry for myself, I admitted. For 13 years, I sacrificed everything for my grandson. Maybe it's time to think about my own dignity. After that conversation, I decided to take drastic measures. I called a locksmith and changed all the locks in the house. Kyle had the keys to the old locks, and I didn't want him to be able to get in while I was away. The locksmith, an elderly Mexican man with kind eyes, was surprised by the number of locks. Senora, have you been burglarized? He asked as he installed the third lock on the front door. Something like that, I replied evasively. I see, he nodded understandingly. There are a lot of bad people out there. You have to protect yourself. Bad people. If only he knew that I was protecting myself from my own grandson. I put the new keys in a safe and gave a spare set to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, with whom I had been friends for many years. I explained the situation to her in general terms. Oh dear, Mrs. Chen shook her head. Bad grandson. In China, such grandsons are a disgrace to the whole family. You're right not to give him money. In her culture, respect for elders was not just empty words, but the foundation of life. Maybe I should have been born in China. On the fifth day, Kyle tried to get into the house. I saw him standing in front of the door from my window, trying different keys. Then he walked around the house, checking all the windows and doors. When he realized that the keys didn't fit, he started ringing the doorbell and knocking. Grandma, I know you're home, he shouted. Open up. Why don't the keys work? I didn't answer, sitting in my chair and reading a book as if nothing was happening. Did you change the locks? Kyle continued to shout. Have you gone completely crazy? I'm your grandson. I have the right to enter this house. Right. Another interesting word. Where did he get the right to enter my house after he humiliated me? Grandma, his voice was becoming desperate. I need my things. I left my documents there. That wasn't true. There were no Kyle's things in the house. After the wedding, he took all his personal belongings with him. Half an hour later, he left. In the evening, a message arrived. You kicked me out of my own home. Mom and Dad would turn in their graves if they saw what you were doing to their son. The mention of his parents was the last straw. Not only did he not regret his behavior, but he also tried to manipulate the memory of the deceased. I wrote back, your parents taught you to respect your elders. It's a shame you forgot their lessons. And I blocked his number. Calls from relatives continued for another week, but gradually subsided. Dorothy was the last to call. Gloria, she said, not as confidently as the first time. Maybe you and Kyle can find a compromise? The holidays are coming, and the family needs to be together. The family needs to be together, I agreed. But first, the family must learn to respect each other. What if he apologizes? Dorothy, it's been 2 weeks. If he wanted to apologize, he would have done so. Instead, he sends relatives to persuade me. But he's proud, too proud to apologize for his cruelty, but not too proud to ask for money. I concluded. I don't need that kind of pride. After that, the calls stopped completely. The house became truly quiet. I could read, listen to music, and garden without fear of unexpected visits demanding money or services. It was a strange but pleasant feeling to live for myself and not be constantly ready to make new sacrifices for an ungrateful grandson. The only thing that bothered me was the realization that the bridge was burned for good. Kyle wouldn't change, I realized, from his reaction to my refusal. He still thought he was right and I was being capricious. He still believed he was entitled to my money simply because of our family ties. But for the first time in many years, I felt free, and that was more valuable than any family ties. On the morning of December 1st, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in many years. No one was demanding money from me. No one was criticizing my appearance. No one was ordering me to clean up my own house. The sun was shining through the bedroom windows, and I had a whole day ahead of me that I could spend however I wanted. Over the past month, my life had changed dramatically. My phone was no longer ringing off the hook with calls from my angry grandson or a crying Jessica. My house had become truly mine, a quiet refuge where no one could demand sacrifices and concessions from me. And most importantly, I stopped feeling guilty for defending my own dignity. The first few days after breaking up with Kyle were difficult. I kept catching myself waiting for his call, his apologies, his promises to change. The maternal instinct that I transferred to my grandson after my son's death made me doubt the correctness of my decision. Maybe I really overreacted. Maybe I should have given him another chance. But every time such thoughts came to my mind, I remembered that evening at the Hendersons' house. Kyle's contemptuous tone when he ordered me to pass him the bread. His comments about my clothes and my mannerisms. That arrogant, our personal ATM, uttered with such confidence, as if he really thought of me as a money-dispensing machine. No, I made the right decision. Better to live alone, but with dignity, than to suffer humiliation from the man I raised and to whom I gave the best years of my life. I made an appointment with a notary for mid-December. I wanted to change the will while the memory of recent events was still fresh, and I hadn't succumbed to sentimentality. The notary, David Stone, had been handling our family's affairs for many years. He was the one who drew up Robert's will and helped with the paperwork after his death. "Mrs. Reed," he greeted me in his office, "it's been a long time. How are you? How's your health?" "I'm fine, David," I replied, settling into a comfortable chair across from his desk. "I want to make some changes to the will." "Of course," he said, taking out a thick folder of documents. "Right now, your grandson, Kyle Reed, is listed as the primary beneficiary. What exactly do you want to change?" "I want to remove him from the will entirely." David raised his eyebrows, but didn't let it show. Over his many years of practice, he had probably grown accustomed to family dramas. "I see. Who would you like to name as heirs?" I thought about it. Who should I leave my life savings to? Distant relatives who had only come forward to persuade me to forgive Kyle. They were only interested in me insofar as it affected family stability and their peace of mind. "I want to bequeath part of the money to charities," I finally said, "to a fund that helps orphaned children, a program that supports the elderly and the local library. And the house, I want to leave the house to the city to be used as a museum or cultural center." "Excellent decision," David nodded approvingly. "We'll draw up a new will, but I must warn you, if your grandson decides to contest it in court, there may be complications. Courts are reluctant to deprive relatives of their inheritance without good reason." "I have good reason," I said firmly, "and if necessary, I will provide them." Then we'll get everything in order, the notary assured me. I'll have the documents ready by the end of the week. Leaving David's office, I felt relieved. Now I didn't have to worry about my money going to someone who despised me. It would go to a truly important cause, helping those in need. That evening, I decided to organize my photo albums. Over the years, I had accumulated many pictures, and many of them were related to Kyle. Photos of his childhood, graduation, college admission, wedding. In each one, he looked happy, smiling, hugging me. It was strange to compare the boy in the photos with the man who had been shouting at my door a month ago, demanding money. When did this transformation take place? When did the grateful, affectionate child become a cruel consumer? Perhaps the changes began after the wedding. Jessica, for all her outward gentleness, was a rather calculating girl. Her hints that my house was too big for one person, her interest in my jewelry, her constant talk about the lack of money, all this could not fail to influence Kyle. Perhaps she was the one who convinced him that his grandmother's money was a family resource that could be disposed of without ceremony. Or maybe it wasn't Jessica's fault, but my own mistake. I gave too much without asking for anything in return. I didn't teach Kyle to appreciate what he was getting. My gifts became as natural to him as the sunrise or the changing of the seasons. Robert warned me about this while he was still alive. "You're creating a monster," he said when I wrote Kyle another large check. At the time, I thought my husband was just being stingy. Now I realized he was wiser than me. I put all the photos with Kyle in a separate box and hid it in the attic. I didn't want to see the face of the man who had caused me so much pain every day. Maybe someday, many years from now, I'll be able to look at these pictures again without bitterness. But for now, they would stay where I couldn't see them. I spent the next few days settling into my new life. I joined a book club at the city library, where women my age gathered to discuss new releases. For the first time in many years, I had time to read not in bits and pieces, but calmly, enjoying every page. I started doing yoga and found a group for older beginners. The instructor, a young woman named Samantha, was patient and kind. She never criticized my clumsiness or demanded the impossible, but simply guided and supported me gently. "Mrs. Reed," she said after one of the classes, "you are progressing very quickly, and you look much calmer than you did a month ago." She was right. The constant tension I felt in my relationship with Kyle gradually disappeared. I no longer flinched at the sound of the phone, waited for another request for money, or braced myself for criticism and reproach. I gave the house a thorough cleaning, not because anyone demanded it, but because I wanted to refresh the space. I removed some things that reminded me of Kyle: his childhood drawings from the refrigerator, his school awards from the living room shelf, gifts he had given me in recent years that now seemed formal and joyless. I bought new cushions for the sofa, bright ones with a beautiful pattern, the kind that Kyle would surely have criticized as too pretentious. I put a bouquet of fresh flowers on the coffee table. I played music that I liked without worrying that someone would say it was too loud or inappropriate. Mrs. Chen sometimes came over for tea. She was a wise woman who had lived a long life and seen a lot. "There's a saying in China," she said once, sipping jasmine tea in my kitchen. "It's better to be alone than in bad company." "You did the right thing, Gloria." "Sometimes I still feel sad," I admitted. He was the only family I had left. "Family isn't about blood," Mrs. Chen replied. "Family is about love and respect. Where was the love and respect in your relationship?" She was right. In recent years, my relationship with Kyle had been based solely on my sacrifices and his needs. No reciprocity, no care on his part, no interest in my life. For the first time in many years, I wasn't waiting for anyone on Christmas. I didn't cook a festive dinner, buy expensive gifts, or decorate the house for guests who only came for money. Instead, I spent the day quietly, reading a book, watching old movies, cooking whatever I wanted. In the evening, Patricia Henderson called. Her voice was warm and friendly. "Gloria, how are you spending the holidays?" she asked. "Quietly," I replied. "And you?" "The whole family is here, but Richard and I often think back to that dinner at our house. We still can't understand how anyone could treat their older relatives that way." "Don't think about it," I said. "You have to let go of the past." "If you feel lonely," Patricia suggested, "come over for tea. You're an interesting conversationalist, and we'd be happy to see you." After talking to her, I realized that I wasn't alone. I have people who value me as a person, not as a source of money. There are activities that bring me joy. There is peace of mind, which I was deprived of for many years. Kyle made his choice when he decided he could humiliate me with impunity. Now, let him live with the consequences of that choice, and I can finally live for myself without looking back at other people's needs and demands. As I fell asleep on New Year's Eve, I thought about the whole year of new life ahead of me. A year without a toxic grandson, without constant tension, without sacrifices for an ungrateful person. A year that I will spend as I wish. And that was the best gift I could give myself.